Hey everybody, we're back again. This is tools for archiving sites. I have 25 minutes and a lot that I want to demo, so I'm just going to go right into it, and there's not going to be a lot of pretext here other than kind of mentioning the different types of categories of tools we're going to talk about. One thing I want to point out is on the main workshop site, you should definitely check out the session description. So if you click tools for archiving sites, I've got pretty much all of the tools I'm going to talk about linked up here. And some of them we'll be spending more time on than others. So you may want to find more information. That's there. So the first thing I kind of want to mention is the difference between, and I should say what I even mean with archiving. So by archiving, I just mean taking a version of a site that exists and making a copy for yourself that you can store someplace else. And that can mean a lot of different things. But the main two things we're going to talk about is HTML flattening. And I don't really know what to call the other one. I'm going to call the other one web recorder because it's kind of its own thing. They call it web archiving, but I feel like that's maybe too general sounding if you're not familiar with it. HTML flattening is great, and all it does is it's a way to take a site like a WordPress site, or it could be of other technologies, and basically it's a little virtual browser that clicks on every link and makes HTML and CSS and JavaScript only versions that you can then get a folder of and put anywhere. So the advantage being you could say take a site made in like a really old version of WordPress that you don't want to run anymore. Maybe it's like WordPress, I don't know, 3, really old and probably very insecure. And you're like, we want to keep this site, but we never need to change it again. We don't need to log into it or do anything like that. You could use an HTML flattener to make that site just HTML files. And then you could put that on your domain of one's own in using the file manager or an FTP client or any other web server for that matter. So that's really a great method. The first thing that does this and is probably the first thing I'd recommend if you're unfamiliar is Simply Static. Simply Static is a WordPress plugin, so it only works with WordPress sites. But basically, you can install it, and it will make a static version of your site, and then you can then take that static version of your site and move it to wherever you want to archive the site. Once that's done and you're sure that the static version has been made and is all good, you can remove the WordPress site. You won't need it anymore. Couple issues with it though. Like I said, it's WordPress only. And then the other main thing that is kind of problematic about it is it's got to make a static copy of the site in the same location or in the same account as your WordPress site in most cases. So sometimes you can end up running out of space because it's essentially making a duplicate copy with all of your images and stuff. So that's one thing to think about. That being said, the other reason I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it is I think Simply Static is relatively easy to use and is also pretty well, well documented. But I think a lot of times when people are trying to archive these things, they're talking about things that aren't WordPress. So the next two tools I'm going to talk about together. The first one is SiteSucker, and it's a macOS only thing. And the other one is HTTrack, and it has a glorious, like 1997's best website. It's amazing. I love it. And it's got a Windows GUI, or it's command line based. So I use it a lot at the command line on Reclaim Cloud or on my Mac sometimes. But SiteSucker for macOS is also great. Both of these tools, you just give it a URL and it will go make a static version of the site. The thing to keep in mind, though, is it's going to crawl the entire site. So it's going to click on every single link and try to make a local version of the site. Usually the default settings are set so that they will not go to other domains, because if they did, you could imagine that it could crawl like hundreds of thousands of web pages and never finish, essentially. Like, what if you linked to google.com? What then? Or Facebook or something. That's pretty common. So usually they will say, all right, like my blog's jaden.me. and they're going to go through and click on every link on Jaden.me, but skip the ones that go out to external domains. So those are two tools. I'm also really not going to demo them because well, I actually will demo HTTrack here in a little bit, but SiteSucker for macOS is really easy to use, and the Windows version of HTTrack is pretty easy to use. But the problem is, I think the more advanced versions of these tools are not easy to use at all. The first one being HTTrack's command line version, which is what I use most of the time when I'm making these. It's not too bad, but you need to set it up, and folks aren't always familiar with how to do that, especially if you haven't used much command line stuff. It's not necessarily simple. And the other one is Web Recorder. And Web Recorder is a whole project that's really fascinating. And it can do, it's like a extension, a Chrome extension, I believe. And the main difference between Web Recorder and HTTrack or other HTML flatteners is Web Recorder makes a singular file of whatever you're trying to archive that is viewable via a lot of different ways. So basically what you can do is you can install a Chrome extension and visit a page, and it will save the page. And then when you're done, you end up with this WARCZ file that you can then go to replayweb.page and view. And that's really, really cool. The problem is, by default, archiveweb.page does not have any way to crawl an entire site. So it's just going to do the single page that you visit or a couple pages that you visit. And if you want to archive like an entire blog, you're going to be doing a lot of manual clicking. The big advantage to Web Recorder, though, is because it packages everything in that WARCZ file, it's really great for folks who want to view a copy of a website later, but isn't necessarily hosted on a web server. So maybe you have a student or a faculty member who's like, I want a copy of my site and I'm not moving it anywhere. I'm just going to, my site's going to go away. I want to be able to open it and view it on my computer. That's actually not super straightforward with HTML flattening, because sometimes links are set up in a way that they don't point to the right locations when they're flattened. It's a little bit tricky. So that's where Web Recorder is really great. So then you get into the issue of, okay, well, sometimes you want flattened sites and sometimes you want this Web Recorder thing, but they do slightly different things. And there is a tool that kind of bridges the gap called Browsertrix Crawler. It is a super mouthful, but essentially it uses what Web Recorder does, but it is an actual crawler. So it'll go and click on every single link like HTTrack. What I find is Browsertrix Crawler is not at all easy to use. It's extremely oriented towards developer folks or folks who are very, very familiar with Docker. So it took me a little while to wrap my head around it. So what I've been working on is a script that kind of does best of both worlds. And I'm going to show you what you can do with it. And I'm hoping to, in the next, like this summer, essentially wrap this up into something that anyone can use, run on Reclaim Cloud if they want to, or their computer, and basically just type in crawl and then the URL that you wanted to do, and it will make both a flattened version for you using HTTrack and a archived version with Browsertrix. So I'm going to show what that looks like. This is going to be a very live demo, so hopefully it works really well. And
for those of you who haven't seen this space, this is the Reclaim Cloud dashboard.
Yeah, that's a good point. We haven't really showed Reclaim Cloud on stream. By the way, I am planning to make this a tool that you could run on either Reclaim Cloud, another cloud service if you really wanted to, or your local computer. It won't really be possible to run this on domain of one's own for a variety of reasons. The main reason actually being it would be a lot of load on your domain of one's own server, and it would probably make it slow or unresponsive while you're crawling sites. So that would be not good at all. So basically what we do here is, and I'm going to go in, I did some messing around with this earlier. I'm going to delete my previous crawls here, and I'm going to make one. We are just going to go in and crawl a slides.jaden.me, which is a version of my where I keep some PowerPoint slides and things like that on my site. So I do archive.sh slides.jaden.me. And what it's going to do is it's going to start crawling the site. And this might take a little bit. This is a pretty small site. But the cool thing that I've got set up here is that this is also a web page. So when it's done, we'll be able to view the results of the crawl and go ahead and download that web archive file so that we can go look at that and see how it turns out. So right now, this is super bare bones and ugly. If you're familiar with this, you'll know that this is just Apache's like default, I don't know what to show you view, but it works. So it's still going right now.
Taylor, while that's running, Ed has a question. He says, do you intend to offer this as a service? He's imagining, hey, Taylor, here's a list of sites. Could you run your script, send me the archives, and then deactivate them on the network?
I'm intending to offer this as something that is so easy to use that you don't need it as a service. And I know that, yeah. So I know it looks a little complicated now, but the idea will be this could be something where you would go into Marketplace and Reclaim Cloud, hit go, and then when you're done, you would pop open a terminal, type archive, and then give it a URL, which would be pretty simple to do. And then we'd also, of course, document it as well, because right now I know that this is a very fast overview. And the reason I'm doing this way is some of this stuff might change a little bit by the time I have this ready for everyone to use. But yeah, that's the intention, is I want this to be something that admins can spin up. And then when they don't need the archiver, they can delete it from Reclaim Cloud. Like, because you could always take what you archive here and FTP it over to Domain of One's Own or any other place.
And it
On
looks
that
like
topic, Jackie had a question about what the system requirements would be for an admin that wanted to spin it up.
Yeah, it's just going to run in Docker. The entire thing will run in Docker. So the advantage of that being is we can run it on Reclaim Cloud, any other cloud service, but you could also run it on a Windows or Mac OS machine. So your own machine would be just fine for that. The advantage being, if you run it on a cloud service, it'll be faster because your bandwidth, your actual internet speed on Reclaim Cloud is extremely fast compared to on your local machine. You have to let it run using your home's internet connection, and you need to make sure your local machine doesn't like sleep, or shut down or anything like that. I will say, if you're doing a couple crawls, doing on your local machine's fine, but if you wanted to schedule this to happen automatically, you probably would want to put it on a server. But that being said, I think making it available as a one-click installer in Reclaim Cloud was sort of bridges that gap where folks can just delete it when they don't need it anymore, so they don't have to pay for it or shut it down. Okay, so the crawl is done. So it made an HTTrack version. I'm going to look at that first. And this is just sort of HTTrack's default output. But basically, I can click on this, and this is my archived site. You can see that it's at crawler.ca.reclaim.cloud/slides.jaden. It's the whole thing. So I can view it, and that's all there, and it works. The other thing I want to mention here, because I only briefly talked about what HTML flattening looks like, is I want to show you what that looks like in the file manager. So if I go in here, there's a slides.jaden.me folder, then HTTrack, and then under this folder, HTTrack makes a little slides.jaden.me. So this is the folder that I could download and move to any other site, and it would be archived. If you're curious what this looked like after you move it, I did do this kind of thing when I was an admin at St. Norbert, and so I would throw them on archive.night.domains, and they would look like this.
Taylor, we have a question from Jackie. Will this continue if it gets interrupted?
Yeah, so the way I have it set up is, so you'll notice that I had the terminal open here. If you close the terminal, it'll keep working in the background. It's not going to be interrupted in that way. That does say that, like, it kind of depends on what you mean by interrupted. Like if you shut down the environment, no, it wouldn't continue. So there are occasions where it would not continue. And this is going to be something that's always going to be, it's going to require an amount of patience, right? Because archiving sites actually does take a while. Like there's a reason I did this tiny little one for a demo. I've been using it for plenty of sites, but oftentimes when you're doing this on a larger site, it'll take 20 minutes, right, to run. So yeah, if you start an archive and close your terminal session, it's just going to keep doing its thing in the background. So that's the HT-Track version, but I also wanted to show, I'll go back to the main site here, the web recorder version, because web recorder does this, or browser tricks crawler does this really cool. And some of this stuff, all these subdirectories that I'm having to navigate through, this is the stuff that I haven't automated yet. And what I want to do is make this really simple so that you don't have to deal with all this. But if I go and download this, and it shouldn't be a super big file, so we're just going to do that. So it's 48 megabytes. This capture-datetime.wacz file, this is a totally portable, self-enclosed version of the website that you can view if you go to replayweb.page. And then Web Recorder also has an ability there's an app you can install if you want to do it in a desktop app. It's pretty much the same thing as a website. And if you want to, you could even actually embed this viewer on another web page. I haven't messed around a lot with that. I know that I think Ed Beck has done that. He's talked a little bit about site archiving before. And so that is also a possibility. So now that I'm at replayweb.page, I can just select my file here. You can even store these in like Google Drive and stuff. It's very flexible, replayweb.page. And you hit load, and it'll show you, okay, these are the sites that are included in this. So if I click on this, it's got a little virtual browser, including the original URL, which is really nice. So I really love this view because it gives it's maybe a small thing, but when I'm looking at an archive of a site, excuse me, sorry, I kind of do care about what the URLs were. So it's kind of nice that it will show you that. And that's really, really slick. So yeah, and so that's what a web recorder archive ends up looking like. So the nice thing I think about my tool is that it makes both versions, because I think there are advantages to both. I like the portability of the web archive standard, but HTML flattening is often what domains admins actually want when they want to throw it on a server to exist in a different location. So I personally think in most cases, you kind of want to have both. And you could, like I've got.
Well, yeah, just every site's built a bit differently, right? So
Totally.
the more options you have to archive that in some fashion, the better, I think.
Yeah. And, you could do things like, you could just zip this up and keep both versions, or put one version on domain of one's own. And then all you have to do is send this WACZ file out to, say it's for a faculty member, you just email that to them and say, here's where you go and can play back the web page. And so now you've kind of got a best of both worlds is what I meant to say. How much time do I have left?
You've got a little over 5 minutes.
Perfect. Okay, so the last one. This is a bonus tool that I is honestly, this one's rough, but I'm excited about, and it's a screenshotting script that I actually started working on like years ago, and then as I was prepping for this session, like on last week, I was like, oh, this belongs in the same conversation, I think.
Absolutely.
Even if it's not exactly the same thing. So what? Sorry, we got you muted, Jim.
What? It better get the best side of Baba Tuesdays.
So what Screenshot Collector does is it is a script that uses Puppeteer, which is I think Google made. It's basically a command line version of Chrome. And
it's not a Metallica song?
Yeah, Master of Puppeteers. So this is not relevant, but basically what this script does is it makes Puppeteer, I think, easy to use if what you want to do is take a lot of screenshots all at once. So this is something that I probably will take me longer, but I think I would include in the site archiving toolkit eventually. And what you'd basically be able to do is just make a text file that has however many URLs you want on it, and then tell it to do its thing, and it would take a screenshot. I made this for Night Domain, so I can tell you that Last time I used this, I used it to take like 580 screenshots, which takes a
Dang.
while.
Yeah.
But the way the script works is it takes them in batches. So I think it took like 3 or 4 hours, which is not that long compared to some of the earlier versions of this that I was trying to work with. So I'll demo this really quick. And again, this is extremely early. So if this is like looks complicated, that's because I haven't had a chance to make it less complicated. So sorry.
So cool to see the process though, and I'm
Absolutely.
particularly excited for the script that you shared just a minute ago too. So
Yeah.
awesome.
So basically, in my case here, it's going to do all of the things in urls-example.txt. And I have a couple like whatever URLs like my blog and like Amazon and stuff. And then throughout the day, I've just been kind of collecting. I did solicit URLs earlier in a Discord thread, but I've also just been, anytime people have been linking the stuff, I've been throwing it in here. So this I think is 36 URLs. So it's not that many, but so my point is some of these might not work because I haven't really tried this. And that's fine. We're all going to be fine with it. So basically, you tell the script to do its thing, and what it's going to do is make a folder called screenshots. It's going to figure out how many URLs it has to work with, and then do it in batches. And it's configurable how many it does at a time. So I have it doing 8. Which is great on Reclaim Cloud because you have all the bandwidth and resources. But if you're doing this on your own machine, you may need to play with that. I will say when I did this for Night Domains, my old computer could only do 5 before I ran out of RAM. Or I don't remember. Maybe it was not RAM. Doesn't matter. So you can see it's already done. It's on batch 3 of 5. And yeah, it gives a little report of what it's doing. So the plus sign means it took a successful screenshot, and I think it'll put an X if it doesn't. I know there'll be at least one X because it currently has a bug where it reads a new line character as a URL. And that's just because I'm not even close to done with this. But I wanted to show this because I wanted to see if this would be useful for anybody, essentially. I think it could be like, I think one version of this could be, you could have it do this like once a month or once every 6 months or something on your domains project, and feed it the list of URLs from the last login script and get an overview of like, this is what every account is. This is how many hello worlds we have and stuff like that.
And also just going back to where we started this conversation, which was trying to, see the arc of sites, right? And I know we talked about trying to track disk usage over time is one way, but even just a simple screenshot to see how these sites are changing and adapting over time. And I've even enjoyed that experiment, going back and looking at my domains with Internet Archive, for example.
Totally.
So I think there's value there.
Could you imagine screenshotting a site like every week and then playing that back as a small video over a year to see if it changes, right?
Yeah, like a course site or something.
It would be great. It would be crazy to see the theme switchers.
Yeah.
Right. Everybody knows the people that switch themes like twice a year. I feel like there's always some of those.
And
I'm not one of them.
It looks like Tom said it would be fun to tie in timeline JS for each site.
Ooh,
Absolutely.
yeah. Okay, so this is what the screenshots folder looks like. And so the cool thing is if you view this as thumbnails, and if I zoom it in a little bit here.
In the last minute.
Yeah. Okay. If I zoom in, you can actually very quickly, it's amazing how fast the human eye can be like, yes. So you can see here's our workshop site. And I don't know, I find this very useful. And I will say when I did this for Night Domains, it was interesting to see like, we have a lot of people using the 2018 theme, but not many using the 2019 theme, just because you can kind of pick out even structural elements like that. So anyway, that's all stuff that I'm actively working on to make accessible to admins. If this is something that you think would be useful, I guess sit tight because it's coming. But if you have like a feature request, feel free to send it. I'm a really bad programmer, so like it's very likely that I'll be like, that would be cool if I could figure that out, and that's all I'll be able to say. But I definitely want to hear
excited
it.
in the chat.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you all so much for joining. We will see you in a couple minutes.